And the Iowa season comes to a close due to a loss to South Carolina, a team they beat last year in the NCAA tournament, but literally a different team. 5 brand new starters for the Gamecocks this year versus then. The big difference, perhaps, they had depth and they had shooters. 8 3-pointers made in 1 less attempt, 4 3-pointers made the year before in 1 more attempt. So for more on this, we're happy to bring in my good buddy Meghan McKeown, who is joining us from on the road, where she is at all times, really, these days. Meghan, let's first off talk about the game. I want to get your analysis on it. And looking back to me, if you're going to beat South Carolina, you need to be borderline perfect, right? And they got way out-rebounded, and they missed 15 shots at the rim, the Iowa Hawkeyes did. What stood out to you?
Well, to start the game, I thought Iowa looked great to go out on a 10-0 run. Caitlin Clark went on a run herself at one point in that quarter. Iowa came out and threw the first punch. I was curious to see how South Carolina was going to try to slow them down. Teams that beat Iowa are the teams that can slow them down, force them to play in the 70s, even 60s, and then make moves. Now, Iowa came out throwing the first punch. I loved the adjustments they made as well when it came to man-to-man defense, going zone, kind of going back and forth to keep South Carolina off rhythm. The issue that teams have run into all year long with the Gamecocks is they have depth, size, and can rebound the ball at a high level. Malaysia Fulwiley comes off the bench and absolutely provides a dominant spark. Nobody on Iowa could stay in front of her. She is elite at getting to the basket, and that opened up so much more for South Carolina in terms of getting the ball inside to Camelia Cardosa, and the chip started to fall, if you will, for Iowa. South Carolina, too much depth, too much size. There's a reason why they went undefeated all season long, but it does not take away from the fact that Iowa, after getting to the national championship last year, somehow finds a way to get back there this year with so many new pieces when it comes to the fabric of their DNA. What a remarkable run for the Hawkeyes.
Agreed. And you think of how truly incredible Monica Czinano was. She'll go down as one of the all-time great post players in Big Ten history, and they didn't have her on this team. And it's not like they went out to the transfer portal and brought in somebody else. So for them to still get back with their young players gaining experience, with their older players taking steps forward, it's pretty amazing. And I want to talk about one of those older players right now with you. Obviously, the vast majority of the attention this season has been on Caitlin Clark, as it should be. There's no one like her in the history of the sport. But Kate Martin is really special, and this tournament really put a spotlight on her. When they needed scoring, she would get it. She had this pull-up jumper, this turnaround mid-range. She would drive in the LSU game when they needed tough drives, and she would get layups. And we always know the leadership factor has been there. In 10 years, we're going to be talking about how she's coaching one of these Final Four teams. I'm sure about it. What do you think about what Kate Martin meant to this year's team in particular?
If Kate Martin was on any other team in the Big Ten, she would likely be the star and somebody that we were constantly talking about. But because you're on a team with Caitlin Clark, you don't necessarily get all of the outside attention that you deserve. Kate Martin was the ultimate X factor for Iowa and was the X factor her whole entire career there. Her toughness, the little things that don't necessarily show up in the stat sheet. Kate Martin grew up playing football. I mean, she knows what it's like to get down and be physical and not have an issue with the contact that comes with, being a basketball player. And she was the person that really allowed everybody else to get into their spots and be themselves and complete their roles. Kate Martin's role on this team, words can't even describe what she did. She understood how to allow Caitlin Clark to be Caitlin Clark and set the tone as a leader for the rest of her teammates to understand how to play with Caitlin Clark. It's not necessarily an easy task. As basketball players, we come in from high school, go to college, and we all want to be the star. We all want to score the points. She understood her role. Martin let everybody else understand their roles. And the little things she did, she became a better three-point shooter over the course of her career. She became a really good ball handler. She became one of the hardest people to box out. She created so many second chance opportunities off of offensive rebounds. All these little things that are kind of like the dirty work that people don't always want to do. Kate Martin took it on with pride. And she is one of the biggest reasons why Iowa has had success over the course of the last 4 years.
And again, the focus will be on Clark. My next question to you is about Clark, but to overlook the impact that Martin and Gabby Marshall in particular had on this team would be a mistake. They were incredibly valuable members all season long, all careers long for them in Iowa City. That being said, Caitlin Clark's time in college is done. We're a week away from her going #1 overall in the WNBA draft. When you look back, Meghan, and it can be from this season or any point in the last 4 years, what do you think in a few years will be the first memory from her college career that will pop up for you?
Mike, I was fortunate enough to be on the call when she broke Kelsey Plum's all-time scoring record in women's basketball. And that was one of the coolest things to witness because she did it in 2 minutes and 12 seconds. It was unbelievable. She scored 8 straight points. It's all she needed to get the record. But I look back and I think, calling her first ever game with Lisa Byington right here on the Big Ten Network against Northwestern, where she was held to a career low 8 points. I can't believe that ended up being the lowest amount of points that she would score in her career. She'd go on to score in double figures in every single college game. I think just about being around Iowa's team and seeing how Caitlin interacted with her teammates, like she's a great person and handled so much pressure and attention as a young person, probably better than most people would be able to handle it. On the court, the logo threes, the jaw-dropping plays, the passes, the no-looks, the behind the backs, all of those things will go down in history. But the way she has handled all of this and carried herself with so much pressure and all eyes on her has been one of the most impressive things I've ever seen.
A little bit later on in the show, we'll air this special retrospective piece that I wrote on Clark, so you're going to want to stick around to watch that. That being said, Meghan, it is time to turn the page, and for the Iowa Hawkeyes, they're looking already to next year. It's a different world. The transfer portal will change things, so we can't tell you 100% what the Iowa roster will look like next year. But I'm thinking you saw the steps forward that Hannah Stuelke took this season. Sydney Falter went from a nice player to a starter in the NCAA tournament and the Final Four. Her rebounding stepped up, her aggression stepped up, her scoring stepped up. What will the Iowa team look like, as much as you can tell right now, for next season?
Well, Sydney Falter is somebody that deserves all the flowers because of how she stepped up to the plate throughout the month of March. Molly Davis went down on senior day for Iowa. I wasn't sure what they were going to look like without one of their starters who they played really well with all year, and Davis was playing at such a high level. Sydney Falter seamlessly steps into that starting spot and starts scoring at a high level. She was doing great coming off the bench, rebounding and doing all of the little things as a role player. But then over the month of March in this Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament run, she was scoring the ball, getting out in transition, the beneficiary of many Caitlin Clark passes on the run. She was knocking down open threes at a high level, defending, diving on the floor for loose balls. So many little things. Sydney Falter is such a complete player in terms of being on the wing and understanding how to run in Lisa Bluter's system. Hannah Stuelke, what can be said? She had 47, 48, 49 points earlier this season. Unbelievable player, one of the best post players in the Big Ten. And I can't wait to see how she continues to grow in terms of her skill development and ability to play with her back to the basket. One of the most skilled players in the Big Ten. And then I'm curious to see who's going to step up into that point guard role moving forward. Taylor McCabe for Iowa is a sharp shooter, somebody who has handled the ball at times for them. But, got to look at the freshman class coming in, what's going to happen in the transfer portal. Unfortunately, so many outside factors still in the month of April before we know what we're going to see. But if you have Sydney Falter and Hannah Stuelke on this roster moving forward, Iowa's going to be in good shape.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the freshman class. I think 4 or 5 top 100 ranked commits are going to be in Iowa City next year. Before I let you go, Meghan, how do you wrap up this season for the Big Ten? Iowa making it to the national championship game. You had Indiana and Ohio State hosting NCAA tournament games. Illinois won the WBIT. Minnesota made it to the title game of the WNIT. What was this year like as a whole for the league?
This year was one of the most competitive years in the league to date. To think that 12 Big Ten teams went to postseason tournaments, that is absolutely unheard of and great opportunities for everybody who participated. But I look at the NCAA tournament and the teams that were able to make some runs. I look at this Ohio State team. even though their NCAA tournament dreams were cut short in the round of 32, they were still such a dominant team. To win the Big Ten Conference outright was huge, especially with an Iowa team that went all the way to the national championship game. Mackenzie Holmes and Indiana, what didn't they do? Like, just such a fun, disciplined team to watch. Sarah Scalia, another great player who won the 3-point shooting contest, by the way, down at the men's Final Four. You look at so many of these teams and the great players in the Big Ten that built a legacy and left the programs better than when they came in. It's really special to see the leaps and bounds the Big Ten made this year. Once again, one of the best conferences and one of the most competitive conferences in the country. And it is scary to think what we're going to be talking about next year when you add in the West Coast teams.
Yeah, like 2 seed in the NCAA tournament UCLA, 1 seed in the NCAA tournament USC with Juju Watkins. It's going to be a blast. Take a few months off. Get ready for it. Meghan McKeown, always great. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, pal.